Hello, welcome to KRACHWERKE. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, share, comment, do all the things that support the channel. Stereo. I've done a previous one about stereo, but it was just like, well, this is how you put a stereo thing together. Boring, right? I think the trick to stereo, in my humble opinion, is, hold on, we might need some light here. So my pretty face shows better. Anyway, so there's a couple of, putting up stereo is not, nothing fantastically, amazingly difficult. You get yourself some sort of splitter pedal or any pedal that has like a stereo out. A lot of the kind of like buffered chorus pedal, stuff like that, they have stereo out. And they also play the stereo out even if the effect is off. So that's how I used to do it before. It's an easy way to split. You don't have to, get any additional kind of fancy things that split the signal. But what interests me about stereo is that, excuse me, nearly all the rigs that I've seen, the stereo is fairly kind of simple and basic. It's like a guitar with a pedal board and then 2 amps. And the 2 amps tend to usually be the same amps with the same speakers. And so what happens is, in that case, it's like the only time when you actually hear the stereo is if there's a stereo effect applied. Okay? So think about it this way. If you record mono, you have a waveform right in the middle. If you have exactly the same waveform in stereo, you still just have one waveform in the middle. It expands the whole stereo spectrum. So the actual guitar tone does not feel like it's stereo. It's only really kind of properly audible when you apply effects. So some of the things that people do is they might apply a little bit of chorus, maybe to one side, or have a wet dry, or they do certain things to try and make it a little bit more kind of stereo. Personally, I feel that if you have a stereo setup, it must be clear that it's stereo. It must actually sound like 2 guitar players. That's my ideal scenario. Okay, so what we're going to try and do in this video is show how to get as much stereo as possible in your signal. So I'll give 2 examples. So I'm running a Valeton, and it has got stereo effects, and it's all going out in stereo. And then I'm also applying the Mimiq pedal, which I'm going to get into maybe a bit more detail. It's actually pretty interesting and disappointing at the same time. Now, here's the interesting part. You do not need the stereo Mimiq pedal to create the thing that the Mimiq pedal is supposed to be doing. Like if you run a stereo rig and you want the 2 different sides to be sound slightly different, or sound like 2 guitars, you don't actually need the stereo Mimiq pedal. You just need one mini, because in this case, for example, I just split the signal. The left goes straight into the Mimiq, and then, is it the left one? I think so. No, I have the right signal. So the right hand signal, remember this for the video, the right hand, the right channel is going through the Mimiq and the effect applied, and the left channel goes straight out. So because all that the Mimiq does, disappointingly, is it adds a delay in the playback. So there's a slight delay when the one side plays back than the other, which is the part that is very disappointing to me, because I've always wanted the Mimiq pedal. When I first saw it and all the hype about it, it was like, oh my God, that's really interesting, right? And it was, now I'm not saying that TC Electronics did it, because I can't remember some of the videos that I watched about it, but they were claiming that it does magic to the signal to make it sound as if it's two different signals, right? So when you use it as a doubler, it sounds like there's two different guitars playing. It doesn't do any of that, and I checked that on the waveform. All it does is, when you apply the effect, all it does is it moves the one signal a little bit later. So it just delays the one signal, and that's it. And you have control over how long that period of time is. And for live, it works. So this is what we're going to do. I'm first going to put the dry on full and just have an absolutely normal stereo signal. So in this case, what's happening is the Valeton applies an amp simulation. It then goes into stereo through the stereo effects, the delays, the reverbs, and then we have two cab simulations running, but they're the same cab simulation. So the idea is here that you have essentially the same amp, the same cabs, but a stereo signal going into them. Now, what I would suggest, obviously, is don't listen to this video on your mobile phone. Put some earphones on or listen to it properly, because there are a lot of nuances that you can hear quite clearly. Right, put the reverb off. So this is our okay, so this is now our stereo signal. The Mimiq essentially is off. This is what you would normally have as a stereo. So in the DAW, we are recreating the two amps to one side or the left, or the two speakers. If I put my reverb on, it's starting to get a little bit clearer. Let's put some delay on, which is a ping pong delay. So you can really hear the stereo pinging back left and right. Okay, now what we're going to do is switch it all back off. Now I'm going to slowly dial in the Mimiq, and you'll hear how it changes. And you can kind of feel it widening. You hear that? This is without any delay or reverb. And we switch the dry off even more. And now we've got the original signal going through the pedal completely off and just the effect on. So now we have one going straight in and one going through the Mimiq pedal, having that slight delay. And immediately we have a much wider stereo field. Now we can accentuate it with some reverb, with some vibe. And now we can play some ping pong. But even without all the effects on, you have a half decent. Now, before my battery runs out and I need to change over to the other settings where we actually try and expand this even more, I'm going to play with the tightness. So the tightness best sound, I think, is right at the bottom. The more I loosen the tightness on the pedal, I think the more it shifts. It's nearly like a slapback, but left and right. So, in my opinion, having this control means that you can kind of tweak it for the situation, make sure that it sounds at its best, because there are certain situations and certain tonalities where you can hear a little bit of phasing issues, which is obvious. And just to make it sound right, you can kind of tweak it. You can get pretty close. So the next part is we're gonna try and boost the whole idea of the stereo even more by applying a few more aspects to the whole signal. Back in a second. Okay, so what did we change? What we changed was I now set the Valeton up to just act like a pedal board, so it doesn't have any amp simulation. It's really just the pedals, reverb and delay. The left side goes straight into the door, onto a channel, and what is applied? On the left we have a Soldano and a Metal 1 speaker, which is, as far as I understand, a Mesa Boogie cab. The other side goes through the Mimiq pedal with the effect full on, so a slight delay. That goes, however, into a rectifier and a Marshall 800 cab. So the left and right now have completely different kind of amps and cabs as well. So it's not the same amps and cabs in stereo, but it's literally two different ones. And the reason I find this is really important is because each amp, especially the speaker cabs, they have their own tonalities and timbre that gets added, their own kind of overtones, harmonics that come over. So there is, just from that point of view, really have the differentiation. Then on top of that, you have the slight time delay, which helps towards it. So suddenly you have a much wider field. And in this case, there's a bit of room in the cab setups, a tiny bit of room, but there's no reverb and there's no delay. The delay is on the pedal board, and therefore, and also the reverb, which means that if I now engaged it, it'll be in front of the distortion, so it gets really over the top. But that doesn't mean you can't do it this way, because all you do is you use the 4-cable method, and you use, well, you would literally have to, you know, have two delays, I suppose, running. But let's put on the reverb. So I don't have this problem in my setup because I use the amp simulation on the Valeton and just use 2 different speakers, which means that I don't have the problem of being forced to have the delay in front of the amp distortion. So I get the reverb and the delay and the modulation behind the distortion effect. So it's obviously a lot cleaner. You can hear how it really kind of boosts it and dirties it up. So the first section of the video was my own IRs that I just applied at the end. If you like that sound, the IRs are you can buy them, and they're dirt cheap, but they're basically five impulse responses that are just ready to use. You know, to fuck around with them. They are perfectly matched for certain tones. So instead of trying to mimic certain amps, they're more kind of certain styles, and they just work straight up. And you can also blend them for some extra loveliness. So anyway, to recap, everything that you can do to differentiate the left from the right channel, the better for a stereo setup. And obviously using stereo reverbs and stereo delays and stereo choruses and stereo roto and tremolo effects, the better. The more you can widen that field. Otherwise, all you have is you just have the effect sounding a little bit, you know, stereo. So thanks for watching, and like, subscribe, share, do all the good stuff that helps the channel. Thank you very much. Working on some new riffs for the last album is out, so please check the channel out. You'll see that there's links and all sorts of stuff for the album. So writers, but starting to come up with some new riffs. Well, to be fair, I always just come up with little sections, and then at some point in the future they kind of like get, you know, shoved together and become a whole. Anyway, thank you for watching.